Welcome, everybody, to the Summer of Cybersecurity Education, sponsored by Raices Cyber. I am so happy to have all of you here today for our first session. So forgive us as we iron out all the bugs of this, but I am super happy to introduce Abram Salem. He's going to be talking about concepts of effective leadership, which is something that we all need at all levels to support our way into cybersecurity. You don't have to be a manager or director or somebody or a team lead to be a leader. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about here today. So without further ado, I want to introduce Abram Salem. So take it away, Abram.
Thank you, Eric. As he said, you don't have to be a manager, you don't have to be a CEO in order to actually be a leader. That's in the household, if you're hanging out with your friends, if your boss gave you guys direction, and let's say that you're not even in a leadership position officially, but you decide to take charge on this one task. That's where all of these concepts come into play. Let me see. There we go. All right, so who am I? My name is Abram Salem. I'm the disclosure, I do have a fear of public speaking, so I'll probably stutter a lot. I'm the executive assistant to the executive director of Raices, as Eric had just said, and I'm also a Marine, an airman, and a martial arts instructor. I've spent the past 25 years in my life in a complete obsession over warfare strategy, and that's where my specialties in this comes from. Leadership is the single largest factor in victory of operations, hands down, right? And we're going to go over why in just a moment. So first off, the lesson plan is, why is leadership actually important? How do leaders guide? There's 3 main strategies. How do leaders work? There's 2 main strategies. What's the best leadership style? That's a bit of a trick question. And then an open discussion afterwards where we can kind of go back and forth. That being said, if you have any questions along the way, I think the proper route that we figured is to put those questions into the event questions section, right? Let me see where that's at right here. Yeah, there's a question section for you to put those in, and then I'll address those as we go along. All right, so first off, why is leadership important? Have you ever heard the phrase, an army of sheep led by a lion is greater than an army of lions led by sheep, or led by a sheep, right? And the concept behind this is, and it's not disparaging those that are being led or calling people that are being led sheep in a negative way, but it's more about the leader, that you can take an entire herd of sheep, but if you have the leader who has ambition and direction and is vicious in their approach, then they can take the sheep and basically conquer the whole world with them. But even if you have the best fighters, or in most of our cases the best skilled workers, if the person who is leading them is disorganized or is not able to put them in any kind of direction, then the very best in the world will accomplish absolutely nothing, right? It really all comes down to the leadership, and that's why it's so important. So the 3 main styles of how a leader will guide, right, is autocratic, democratic, and I looked up how to pronounce this beforehand, but laissez-faire, it's a French word, and we'll get to that when we get to it.
Laissez-faire.
Thank you, Eric. So going over the autocratic, right? This form of leadership is decisive, it's quick. This is, I say, you do, and there's no discussion about it, right? And there's a place for that type of leadership, right? The pros of it is that if you're in a situation where you need to make a decision right now, then you need a leader who is confident in their ability to make that decision, that they have the expertise and the know-how to make the proper decision, right? And if you have that, then this is very effective. But where it kind of falls apart is that it puts all of the stress of the decision on the leader themselves. There's no diversity of thought. If you have 5 experts and one of them's in charge, and that person's the only one making the decision, then what's the point of having 5 experts? You may as well have one expert, and as we said earlier, just 4 sheep. And it also prohibits the ownership from the team. If they're not a part of making the decision, then the result really isn't something that feels as earned, right? So it has its place, and we'll get to that as well. So the second form of leadership is democratic. Conversely, it's more of diversity of thought. There's more team accountability. And if you have 5 experts on, trying to handle a situation, then, obviously you have 5 experts and not just one. You can probably come up with a better situation or a better solution to this. Now, the con to this, of course, is that it's more time consuming because it's not just one person decisively saying, all right, we're going to do this, but it's 5 people that have to talk about their different opinions. These different opinions can cause conflict. And the other con is that if you have a limited expertise in the team, let's say you have 1 expert and 4 people that have no idea what they're doing, then perhaps the democratic approach wouldn't be as well advised because the opinions, humbly, they don't mean as much as the expert opinion itself. All right, and the third way of guiding is, how's it pronounced, Eric? I know it was on the spot. I'm sorry.
Laissez-faire.
Laissez-faire. Thank you. Laissez-faire, or as it translates to, let you do. Right, and this form of leadership isn't I make the decision, and it isn't as a team we're going to come and make the decision, but it's more trusting your workers and saying, hey, this is what I need to get done, do it. And it lets your workers, kind of figure it out on their own. Now, the pros of this, of course, is that it encourages that trust between the leader and between their workers. It allows the workers to come up with a way to do it that the leader would have never thought of. And I experienced this a lot when I was in the Marine Corps. My leaders would tell us to do something, and they wouldn't tell us at all how it could possibly get done. And with the result of that, and which is what they were going for, is that we figured out ways to do it that were better than what they would have told us, because we had to start from scratch, to reinvent the wheel, as you will. And of course, this also empowers the individuals to come up with their own solutions, and then to feel a sense of pride over feeling a struggle and feeling a sense of doubt, and then overcoming it and coming up with a solution. Now, the cons to this is that it's a little slower because they have to figure it out on their own. It can be less productive depending on how hands-off the leader is. If they're not guiding, if they're not watching at all, then if the worker's not motivated, then there's a chance that the work's not going to get done at all. And the other thing is that if coming up with a solution requires a certain level of skill from the worker, then the unskilled worker simply won't be able to come up with an effective solution to begin with. So as we see, everything kind of in its place and in due time. So those are the 3 main styles of guiding your workers. And then what we'll come into next is, once you figured out how to do something, how do you actually do it? Once you've told them how to dig the latrines or how to accomplish a task, are you in there actually doing it with them, or are you kind of standing on the sidelines, pointing at them and saying, do this, do that, right? And there's a time for both of those as well. So this is one of my favorite quotes here A leader leads by example and not by force. And that's, I mean, it's in the word itself right there. It's somewhat obvious. But how leaders work, as I went over, is there's two main styles. Is that authoritative, which is very inspiring and accurate to their vision. That is what you think of when a leader says, do what I do. Look at what I'm doing and then do that, right? They're in the front of the battle, or they're in the front of an operation. They say, hey, we're going to write this program and then just help me, right? You do this, I'm going to do that, right? They're in there with it. And another advantage of that is that it gives the leader an understanding of what's actually going on. If the leader were more delegative, then they could say, hey, clean the bathrooms all day long. And they don't really understand that maybe you don't have the proper tools for it, something along those lines. But when the leader is actually in the ditches with you, then they can say, okay, for my expertise, we need a better shovel, or we need a better program, or we need this or that. Who's that? All right. Now, the cons of this is that it gives more stress on the leader because obviously there's a higher workload. The leader is not only making decisions, but then they have additional tasks to do as well. It can be distracting from the decision making, and to some it can be seen as micromanaging, as not only that they're delegating certain tasks, but then they're actually there, they're right in your face, and they're there the entire time. So there's pros and cons to that. Now, the other style, the delegative, the pros to that is that if a leader is not in the ditches with you, then they can lead a larger force. They can lead seemingly an infinitely large force. Because they have leaders below them, they can see from the bigger picture. It improves the worker skill set because you don't have the leader in there saying, okay, do what I do, and then maybe the leader's doing the difficult task, and then the workers are doing the less difficult task. No, the workers have to do the difficult task, and in turn, they can become experts in their field. And the last advantage there is that it allows the leader the actual time to think and spend the entire workday just strategizing and understanding everything that's going on, and not actually taking time to do the tasks themselves. Now, the cons are that it leaves a higher workload on the workers, that it risks the leaders being out of touch, and that they can appear lazy, basically, to their workers. If you ever think about if you've ever had a leader in the past that says, hey, do this, that's kind of something no one wants to do, and then they're up there in their cushy office not doing exactly that, maybe going by the excuse, oh, well, I did that 20 years ago, so I don't have to do that now. Those are certainly cons that can cause an uprise from the workforce, and a lot of distrust between the leaders and the workers. So the question is, what is the best leadership style? It's a trick question because the real answer is that you have to know when to do this, when to do that. When is it appropriate to lead from the front, and when is it appropriate to lead from the side? And a lot of that honestly just comes from experience and trying to think on the specific situation. So to give a couple examples, if you come across a task all of a sudden that needs to get done, and it's something that, like sweeping the floor, right? You walk in, floor needs to get swept. You can see that, your other people are busy and you're not busy at the moment. Then taking a broom, sweeping that floor, and not saying anything about it could inspire the workers to do the same, to see that, you're not the type of leader who is above the grunt work. And it inspires a lot of respect and trust between the leader and between the workers that are on their team. Now, if it's something along the lines of there are a million tasks to get done, There's a million tasks to get done, and sorry. So there's a million tasks to get done, and the leader has to organize a lot of what has to get done. Then that's a situation where they would be better off to delegate and say, you do this, you do that. Hey, I know you don't want to do it, but this is what's got to get done in order for the team to succeed. Now, the quote that I have here is from Bruce Lee, that you must be shapeless, formless like water. When you pour water into a cup, it becomes a cup. And when you pour water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. I think that just fits absolutely perfectly with the question of what's the best leadership style, because the answer is all of them. There's a time to be hands off. There's a time to be in the ditches. There's a time to rely on your own expertise, and there's a time to rely on your team's expertise. There's a time to let your team make their own decision, their own mistake, take all the time they need, and to come up with the best solution. All right. So that was rather quick. I know I talk a little quickly, but I would like to, do we have any questions set up? I don't see anything.
No, but I changed the permissions in the room, so if anybody wants to discuss something, they can unmute themselves and ask a question.
Hey, Abram, it's Vanessa. Oh, I'm sorry, Leon. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, you first. Okay.
Thank you. Hey, Abram. So I know you mentioned in the beginning. I'm so sorry. In the beginning, that you were in the military. Did you learn these leadership skills throughout your military career?
I did. Yeah, I actually, so a quick summary. I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, and there's a promotion system in the Marine Corps that's dependent on what job you have. And the long story short is that in my job, people didn't get promoted. There just wasn't enough spots for it. So I spent 4.5 of those years as a lower grade Marine, so to say, where I was the subordinate and not the leader. And I went through about 6 different leaders during that time. And it's from that I feel as though I gained so much expertise and leadership styles, because they were all completely different. I saw the good leaders, the bad leaders. Now, there was also, once I did, get promoted into a leadership position, we went through courses and trainings and stuff like that. But I definitely attribute from being a subordinate and being led and taking notice to what worked and what didn't, as to where that came from.
Yeah, and let me interject here. That's a very good point in leadership, is don't only learn the good things from the leaders, also learn the bad things, or observe the bad things, so that when you become a leader, when you get put in a position of, team lead, or, you're leading a group or a small team, that you say, that didn't work for me. Let me try, doing something that's different. And that's also very good learning, is learn the good, learn the bad, apply what's best for the situation.
And I'll share a quote from one of my favorite leaders that he told me, which is that you can't, and I say, man, this is just what he said. You can't make a man fear you. Once he decides that he doesn't care about the punishment, about anything, then you've lost all control. He said, but you can make a man respect you, because that's not really within their control. And I'm not talking about the respect in their actions, but rather respect in their thoughts. If you are someone who is respectable in the way that you lead your team, that you treat them fairly, that you're a hard worker, that they see that you're honorable to your word. If you're someone who's respectable in that manner, they have no choice but to feel a respect for you. And you side that versus like someone that's like, hey, I'm going to punish you if you don't do what I say. Once they decided that, they're going to leave the organization and they don't care what you think, then that's worth nothing.
Yeah, that's very true. Getting respect comes in different ways. Like you mentioned, is leading from the front, is not being afraid to get in there and get your hands dirty. That builds a level of confidence for your leadership. The other, is given leadership. Sometimes you don't know that leader. You don't know what that leader has done. And they're your director or your vice president or your team lead or your SOC lead. That's respect that you have for the position, but the true leaders are the ones that don't say go, but say, let's go and go with you as a team. Fear is a motivator, but it only goes so far. And being a true leader is being somebody that people want to follow, that people want to emulate, that people say, this person knows where we're going. And that's one of the best features of leadership, is having somebody that knows kind of the path that we have to follow. Or if we don't know the path, we do it together and listen to all the folks that are in the team.
So I would like to summarize what we went over today as the three types of guiding. And the reason I want to summarize is because as you're developing to be better leaders, I think that it helps in your practice. Every decision that you make to try to fit it into one of these categories. So the three ways that you guide is either you're making the decision on your own, or you're pulling in from your subordinate. Sounds condescending, but you're pulling in from your team in order for everyone to make the decision, or you're letting them make the decision and kind of do whatever they want. You give them the general task and you don't tell them how to do it, right? So you've got those three types of guiding, and then you've got the two types of acting, which is that either you're in the ditches with them, or you're standing next to the ditch and you're telling them, do this and he'll do that. And there should definitely be a reason for either one of those, because as, let's say someone that you've got 30 years experience, if you're doing something that it takes 1 year of experience to do, then realistically you're wasting your time. And if someone's paying you to do it, then you're wasting their money in doing a task that is below your pay grade. But at the same time, if you're standing by the sidelines not doing anything, then it definitely serves a lot of distrust between you and your workforce, and you should be in the ditches, provided there's not something better for you to do with that time. Yeah, so I would say for everyone, as you're becoming better leaders, to try to think about those 5 concepts and fit everything into one of the first 3 and fit everything into one of the second 2 in all the decisions that you make.
Yeah, and we have a question here from the team. Is there a method you would recommend to address, say, an autocratic type leader that is often close to feedback or other ideas?
So if I understand correctly, you're saying if you're one of the workers and your leader is autocratic and is closed off to feedback, what to do in that situation?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. I'm going to pull this from Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. one of my favorite books. But he says, don't outshine your leader. So if he says this is the best way to do it, right, or this is how we're going to do it, then the answer, if you want to get your point across, is yes. And then provide extra information, which may cause them to change their mind. And that's if they're not open to being a different type of leader, that is. I don't know if that was totally clear.
Yeah, I will give you my perspective working in the field for as long as I have. There are times that you have a leader that is completely autocratic and will not listen to what the team is saying. And one of the things that I always tell you is a good leader listens first, speaks last. Asks the question, listens first, speaks last, and makes the decision at the end, but takes all the input. That's a good leader. And it takes years to develop that kind of leadership style. But you find yourself with a lot of newer leaders that want to lead, that want to do that want to get to that level, but they don't understand that. And they just, everything's a command. And that's equally dangerous, especially in our career field. There's so many variables to hear, to listen, to understand. And that's important that we take the views of the experts. As a leader, you hire experts, you hire people with knowledge, and you, as a leader, you got to let them do their job because they know, some people are, like they say, a mile deep and an inch wide, and some other people are a mile wide, inch deep. So you've got to get the different perspective. And that's what we say about diversity of thought, is bring all the different thoughts so we can accomplish the mission the best way we know how. At the end of the day, it's that leader's responsibility to accomplish the mission with the team. And they have to make the decision of which path we're going to take. But a leader that doesn't listen is not a true leader. It's a manager. Okay. And we don't want to be managers. We want to be leaders. So how to address a person like that? There's various things that you can do. Number one, you can pull them aside and say, hey, have you considered this? That's a good way to doing it so that you're not doing it in public and embarrassing that person. You can give them another perspective in public, in private. But sometimes you get these hard-headed people that will not listen. So it's kind of like a catch-22 when you have these autocratic leaders. So there's different strategies. Pull them aside, talk to them, tell them, what do you think about doing this? What do you think about doing that? And maybe they will take it. If not, you do the task the way it goes. And then if it fails, you pull them aside and say, hey, let's try doing it this way and see if that changes their perspective. But sometimes in smaller teams, this happens, and this happens more often than not. And that's why we have to do these types of meetings and trainings and, communications so that we all learn to be a better leader when we are called to lead.
Yeah, we were talking in text chat that my boss, the let you do type of boss, he knows I'm the expert in pen testing, but he doesn't intervene the pen testing part of my. He guides me through the management side of my job, the KPIs, presenting to executives, and all the other business related stuff that I'm not an expert on. And when I need help or another a coworker needs help, he tells us, hey, you can talk to Leo because he knows a lot of offensive security. So he can give you the perspective of an attacker for this task and let you secure more deeply. And I like that about my boss. And this talk helps me understand him better, that aspect.
You know, one of the best bosses, I will never forget this guy, Oliver Alvarez. Okay, he was my boss at the World Bank. And every time I got frustrated with a task, I would go to him and say, I quit, boss. And he would look at me and say, me first. And when he said that, it would calm me down. But that was every day. I would go to him and go, hey, boss, I'm quitting. And he goes, me first. You can't quit until I quit. And it was kind of like, I'm here with you. I understand you. Let's figure out how to do it. So you're going to come across in your professional life with people that are going to stick with you, and they're going to guide the way that you're going to lead teams. So when you find that person, learn from them, learn how they do things, learn how they communicate up to their leaders and how they're communicating back down to their teams, and learn the good things. Like I said, learn those good traits from those good leaders that you're going to run across. And then I've had some horrible leaders, which I won't name names, but that literally I learned everything what not to do in leadership. And those are equally as important for you to learn the things not to do. All right. Do we have any other questions? Any other comments? Go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. All right. Well, if we don't have anything else, let me be the first one to thank you, Abram, for stepping up and doing our first talk of the Summer of Cyber. So let's give him a round of applause, everybody. Come on, unmute yourselves and applaud.
I assume that everyone's just clapping with the mics muted.
There you go. The chat is going.
All right. Thank you. Everybody's clapping. Okay, cool. So there you go. Giphy's work too. All right. Well, I want to thank you again for being here, all of you for being here. We have an exciting chapters and topics that we're going to be doing here every Saturday. Let me see. We have next week, we have Gerald Auger talking about a day in the life of a governance, risk, and compliance person. We're going to be doing a talk the next week about building your own cybersecurity lab. We have getting into the try hack me and hack the box, and learning about that. We have a really interesting talk from Brian Pendleton on AI and how AI is not going to replace your job. We're going to do a getting into cyber seminar that we're going to hopefully get a lot of people for that one. We're going to have an introduction to DFIR, or incident response forensics and incident response. We're going to have networking and building a community and a lot of other topics throughout the summer. So this is going to be great. Tell your friends, bring them up. We have a lot of stuff planned for this summer. We're growing this community, and I want to thank all of you for being here and supporting this community for us. So with that, if we don't have anything else, thank you very much for being here, and we're going to close this live session in a second here.